No author wants to feel like a failure. We all spend a lot of time writing our books, crafting our worlds, getting our creative juices flowing, and trying to create a story that resonates with readers and that people will enjoy. And the idea that somebody might not enjoy it, that can feel crushing, downright crippling, even. Or to put all of that work in getting a book out into the world and have people still not take you seriously as an author. All of that can hurt. Nobody wants failure. And in this video, I want to talk about how to think about failure and my mental mindset that has helped me get past failure so that not only am I not afraid of failure anymore, but in certain circumstances, failure can be a welcome thing. And I'll explain what I mean as we go. My name is Nate Gillick. I am an independent fantasy author. My debut novel is Welcome to the Nexus, and I am currently hard at work on the sequel. But let's dive in talking about failure, starting with some of the different ways failure can manifest itself for authors. Number one, the fear of finishing. When you are starting to work on a book, your manuscript, it's your beautiful, perfect baby. It's this great story. You have these lofty, high in the sky ideals. The book is going to be amazing. Then, when you finish that draft and it's time to start editing and revising and really digging in and getting it ready for publication, reality sets in. It's no longer this perfect, beautiful baby. You have to deal with the reality of what is actually there. And that reality, that process of editing and revising things, that can cripple people, especially if you've got perfectionitis. And there are times where you just need to make a checklist or talk with author friends or beta readers. Say, here's the checklist of things that need to be done. Execute the checklist, fixing those items, and then you're done. No more turning the wheel. It's time to move on. Fear number two, the fear of choosing wrong. This is insecurity and lack of faith in your own creative decisions. Are people going to hate me if I kill off a character? If I make a character this species or this race instead of that species or that race, how are people going to react to it? If I say X, Y, or Z, are people going to take that as political? Did I mean it to be? Did I not mean it to be? There are many different ways that an author can second guess themselves in their own story choices, and that can lead to crippling self-doubt. That can bring a manuscript to a halt. And I think experience is the best teacher with this one, and having courage of convictions and know what it is that you intend to say, execute on what you intend to say, and then to stand by that creative vision. Number three, the fear of judgment. So this is very similar to the last one, so I won't spend too much time on it, but fear of the thing that you've put out in the world, people aren't going to like you for it. Maybe you fear being review bombed. What are your family going to think? Depending on the genre you write, this one affects a lot of people. The fear of wasting time is another one. Imagine, spending dozens, perhaps hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours writing a book if you're writing a big, long epic, and putting it out into the world to crickets. No interest, no sales, nobody seems to care. And I'm not saying that's going to happen for you. I'm not saying that's anybody's reality, but I think a lot of people have that fear in the back of their head as they're writing. It's, what if nobody likes this? If you've got pie in the sky dreams of selling 100,000 copies and becoming a bestseller or a mega viral hit, and then that doesn't happen, is that going to feel like wasted time for you? So what wasted time means is going to be different for everybody, for every author. Everyone has different expectations here, but nobody wants to feel like they worked so hard to create a book and then it failed to hit whatever metrics you have set for yourself and how you wanted it to do. Fear of marketing. A lot of authors have this one, even if they won't admit it. I think it's very rare to find an author who enjoys marketing. We got into creating stories because we had a story to tell, because we enjoy the creative process, because we enjoy world building or coming up with fantasy universes or characters, or, compelling characters and then making them kiss. Uh, Not the act of saying, buy my book and trying to get people interested in it. Artists can see marketing as vain or as selling out or as tacky. But if the objective in publishing a book is because you want to make money on it, nobody can buy a book that they don't know exists. So everybody's got to do some marketing. So not everybody has to market in the same way. There are different platforms you can use. There are different tactics. It's not mandatory to have a TikTok account. It's not mandatory to make a YouTube or a Substack or anything else. Pick the flavors that work for you and leverage those. But hiding behind a fear of marketing and refusing to do any of it because you don't like it, then you're inviting a different kind of failure, which is the failure to sell anything. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. 99.99% of us do not slap a book up on Amazon and it immediately goes viral with no effort on our parts. That is not how this works. That is not how Amazon's algorithms work. That is not how any of this works. You got to do some marketing. The fear of not being a real author. I absolutely hate the phrase a real author. Who has been appointed to the Mount Olympus of authordom who gets to decide who does or doesn't count? If you've put your time, energy, your heart and soul into creating a book, you're a real author. If you've published a book and you have sold even one copy to somebody who is not your immediate family, congrats, you're a real author. Do not allow other people to decide for you what does or doesn't count. And I think the unfortunate thing is there are always going to be people with a gatekeeping mentality about this. If you're not, if you self-publish, you're not a real author. I've heard that before. When I was in college, I have a degree in creative writing, and my English professors back at that time treated genre writing as not real writing. So by the standards of some of my English professors, even though I have an epic fantasy novel published, I would still not be a real writer. Genre fiction doesn't count. And I self-published, so again, I don't count. There's always going to be somebody out there who, for some reason or another, says you don't count. And one thing you have to accept as an author is that, your haters don't define you. If you're going to stick around writing for any length of time, you define you. You need to write, to satisfy yourself, to make your own self, your own soul happy, and find like-minded people. Don't let people who don't wish you success define what you are or are not. And I know this can lead into imposter syndrome. If you're in a room, like at Author Nation, for example, a big author conference, and you haven't published yet, and you're surrounded by people who have published 10, 20, 50, 100 books, it can feel like, oh, I don't belong with these people. But, if you're in that kind of a writer's conference environment, you're learning and you're putting the work in, why should you feel any less valid because you have less experience than those people? The difference is time. If you keep working, you can be at their level. So, like I said, do not let other people define for you what you are. The fear of asking for help. This is another one where, someone may say you're not a real author or you don't know what you're talking about if you want to ask for help from somebody else. I mean, in the publishing industry, there's a lot of things to know and a lot of things that you cannot reasonably be expected to know right out the gate. Do you know how to design your own website? Do you know how to design your own covers? Do you know interior formatting for paperbacks? How good are your editing skills? Can you self-edit or do you need extra sets of eyes on that? Do you know how to find beta readers? Do you know how to distribute advanced reader copies? That's just stuff off the top of my head. If you don't know all of these things right off the bat, that is perfectly fine. And there's no shame in asking for resources or help, reaching out to other authors, finding other YouTube channels and resources. You're not a loser or a failure if you're seeking other knowledge. That is the smart thing to do. People who do not want to fail recognize the gaps in their knowledge and do something to address their gaps in their knowledge. So asking for help and trying to study up, That doesn't make you a failure. That doesn't make you dumb. It makes you smart for reaching out to try to plug in those gaps. Give yourself some credit for that. The fear of financial loss. This is a big, ugly one. If you're watching this video, I am assuming you are not independently wealthy. And none of us want to spend a ton of money producing a book only for it to flop. And, maybe we don't want to get filthy rich, but I think most of us would at least like to recoup what we've invested. Both cover art that you see on the canvases behind me, both of those covers were $500 or more as custom commissioned art. So, that's just one expense. I think between all of my expenses setting up my business and publishing my first book, it was about $2,500, I believe. I've earned all of it back, but it can be scary to risk losing money. And I would tell anybody in publishing, spend within your means. Do not spend $10,000 on some big editing package or whatever. You got to be comfortable with what you're spending. And as your career grows and as your fan base grows, get more, then you can work your way up to bigger expenses as your income justifies it. But I tell everybody, spend within your means. Which means if a book isn't as successful as you like right away, you've also failed within your means, and you're not jeopardizing your personal financial safety on the road to building an author career or chasing a dream. Now, when we're talking about failure, one thing I want to remind everybody of and contextualize failure is that everybody fails sometimes, and even the elite of the elite can fail. And I'm going to start by giving you a couple examples from sports to illustrate what I mean. So on screen here, we've got statmuse.com, and I have LeBron James' worst shooting performances pulled up here. I think it's pretty uncontroversial to say that LeBron James will be in the NBA Hall of Fame at some point. He's had an extraordinarily long career. There are many stat categories where he's the all-time leader in. But there have been there was one night where he didn't make anything. He missed every shot he took. There have been nights where he shot, sub 25%. So he missed 3 out of 4 shots or more. I mean, he's had some stinker of performances in there. He's still going to go into the Hall of Fame. I mean, I don't doubt that for a second. Then let's go over to baseball. So I have here from baseballreference.com the career batting averages for the best players ever. Okay. And we're going to zoom in. I want you to see the best players ever did not average 40% over their entire career. So these players, the plus means Hall of Fame, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer, Hall of Famer. All of these Hall of Famers, they failed to get a hit more than 60% of the time when they are at bat. And these people are the elite of the elite. In baseball, when you're up to bat, failing to get hit is the statistically expected outcome. But being able to get on base 30 to 40% of the time makes you one of the best to ever play the game at the professional level. Athletes don't beat themselves up over a missed shot or a strikeout. They get back up there and they go again. They shrug it off and they keep going. And that is the attitude that artists and creative people need to have too. Took a shot, missed that one. All right, I'm going to line up and take the next one. Pro golfers don't make every putt they've ever taken. Now, if sports isn't your jam, let's examine failure in other contexts, like the invention of the light bulb. I did a search, how many tries to invent the light bulb? The information on this is all over the place and it's contradictory. Some say 1,000 attempts. I've seen sources say 10,000 attempts to invent the light bulb. If somebody finds a really true high quality source, let me know in the comments. But what is universally agreed upon is that the light bulb was not invented on the first try. It took many times to get it right. And, Edison and everybody else working on early light bulbs, they didn't, try it once, screw it up, and then pick up their toys and go home. They tried again and again and again, and then they succeeded. So if inventors can have it, we can do it too. Another example, medicines. According to Britannica, of every 5,000 to 10,000 chemical compounds being evaluated for potential use in drugs, only 5 reach clinical testing. That is an extraordinary failure rate of, scientists looking at a compound and going, this has potential. And the enormous majority of them get thrown out, going, nope, fail, fail, fail. We can't use that. And it's perfectly accepted part of the process. So we cannot get, hung up on every bad thing. Failure is the scientific method. Think about how scientists approach things. They have a theory or a hypothesis on what they expect to happen. Then they set up controlled conditions to try to see if that thing is going to happen or not. If it happens, great, they have confirmation. Now let's retest to verify that we were right. If it doesn't happen, then they go, why didn't it happen? Is there something wrong with our methodology? Is there something wrong with our idea? Is there something wrong with the equipment? They're going to study that failure, learn from it, and then the next experiment, they're working towards success because now they know what didn't work, and that can help figure out what will. So scientists are okay with failure as long as they're learning something from it and progress advances that way. Again, as creators, we need to have that mindset of it is okay to fail. Think about famous authors. Stephen King, one of the best-selling authors of all time. His work has been adapted hundreds of times into TV shows and movies. He threw one of his books in the trash. I think it was Carrie. Someone can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm speaking extemporaneously here. His wife pulled that out of the trash, read it, said this is good, and the rest is history as far as his career goes. He kind of self-failed in a moment of doubt in himself and disbelief. And thankfully for all of us, he had someone in his life who believed in him. But even the best don't strike gold every time, don't always see things the way other people do. So your favorite author has almost certainly failed at something at some point. They didn't write an immaculate book on the first try, immediately go mega viral, universal acclaim, not a single 1-star review. I mean, come on, everybody, nobody's perfect here. So we need to kind of lower our expectations on perfection and think of failure as proof of effort. If you haven't tried to do something, you can't fail at it. That's why I'm always accepting of some failure, because it means I did something. I tried something. And my attitude is failure is only a problem if you learned nothing from the experience. If you are smarter for what you did and are ready to write a better next book or design a better next cover or retool your website because something you learned through screwing up the first time, great. You are making progress. Failure is okay. Learn from it. Now, with that said, I'm not advocating for people to just go out and blindly do things and, blindly fail and say, well, that's okay. Like I said earlier, smart people recognize the gaps in their knowledge and take steps to address those. You learn and you improve. So, before going out and do something, before printing 1,000 copies of a book, do you have a distribution plan? Do you actually know where you would sell those? Or, where would you store all of that inventory? There are mistakes and failures that can be entirely mitigated or prevented by doing some of that educational knowledge up front. Understanding how much something's going to cost, doing some market research to figure out what opportunities for a live event exists. I always advocate people doing your homework, but even studying as much as possible is not going to mitigate all failures. And being in study mode forever is a failure of its own, because if all you're ever doing is learning because you're afraid to commit to something, the failure now is that you're failing to make any forward progress in your career because, have you published a book? Are you doing any marketing? If you want everything to be perfect before you've ever taken your first step, you're never going to make your first step. So, learn what you can to mitigate some obvious failures that knowledge could have prevented. But do the thing. You know, if you want to sell books at a live event, go to a live event. Practice pitching your book to people, having face-to-face conversations, see what other authors are doing and what works and what doesn't work. Jot down what was attendance like at this venue. Did you make your table feedback? You know, take notes about all of this to learn and do better next time. That is the iterative process. And to close this video, to show that I am not perfect and have definitely failed myself, I wanted to share with folks some examples of my own failure. So one is claiming my own author Goodreads profile. I have basically bleached the specifics of that process from my memory, and I have no interest in looking up how to do it again. I did it, but it took at least 3, maybe 4 tries to actually get them to accept that I am who I say I am and, you know, give me the Goodreads author profile badge. I was kind of ready to rip my hair out. I found that process very frustrating. I did not succeed on the first try, but I was persistent. You know, every time I learned about what didn't work, tried again, I eventually got through. For the last 2 years, I have applied to be a speaker at Author Nation in Las Vegas. You know, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, author industry conventions out there. My pitches have not been accepted. I was not a speaker at Author Nation last year. I will not be a speaker at Author Nation this year. And I believe they said something like 85 to 90% of all sessions are rejected. A lot of people pitch ideas. There's a lot of great ideas for comparatively few speaker slots. So if you are going to apply for an industry event like that to be a speaker, failure is the expected outcome. I knew that going into it, but you never, you know, you miss all the shots you don't take. So I went for it. And every time I've pitched, I've learned more about what showrunners for that kind of event want to see, a little bit more about how they will vet those things, a little bit more about how to better craft a pitch for a presentation and how to structure things. So I think when I'm looking for future speaker opportunities or thinking about how I want to approach similar opportunities like that, you know, I may not have gotten in a speaking slot, but just the process of going through that has made me sharper and smarter about how to approach those kinds of things going forward. So I don't regret making that effort or taking that time. Earlier this year, I was a guest author at JordanCon, which is a big fantasy book themed convention in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was the only author there who only had one book to his name. So I'm in an author's alley with 40 other authors, all fantasy. So it's very hyper specific to one genre. And all of them are more established than me. And I based the number of books I would sell on a percentage of attendance, somewhere between 4 and 5%. I'm forgetting the exact number. But ultimately, you know, in that kind of a hyper competitive environment and with only one book, not a completed series to my name, I ended up overprinting for the event. And so all of the profits that I made got sucked up in shipping my overstock home. So that was an expensive lesson to learn about printing and shipping for long distance events, and that I should probably be more conservative with that, especially over a long distance event. The math is completely different if I'm doing something within 30 minutes to an hour of my house and I can load boxes into a car and carry them all home, and I needed to drive to an event anyway, versus needing to pay UPS to ship boxes home. So, you know, that was an expensive failure, but I have learned from it, and that changes my event calculus for some things. Also, the first website I ever made, I would call that an absolute failure. I created an author website for myself probably a year to a year and a half before I actually needed one. And it was through WordPress, which I absolutely do not like. I found it extremely not user-friendly. Updating things was time-consuming and difficult. And half of the time I couldn't even get things I wanted to do to work. So it was an unnecessary expense. It was needless frustration. But from that, I learned what I will and will not accept in a website building tool. Learned better what I am willing to pay for the convenience. of having easier tools, and I learned more about my own sense of aesthetics as to what a good author website should look like and the kind of information I want to convey on mine. So while my first website sucked, I could take all of that knowledge, and when I made my new website, the current NateGillick.com, it is an infinitely better looking website for everything I had learned through the trouble. So again, I took a mistake and I learned from it. So those are some thoughts about dealing with failure and how to improve on things. It is okay to fail. Don't let failure define you. As long as you're learning and growing a little bit better every time, that is what will give folks the staying power in this industry. Think about your favorite author. Think about how many books they've put out, but how many are they really known for? Like my favorite author is Timothy Zahn. He's best known for his Star Wars stuff, much more than any of his own original work, which I think is a tragedy because I love a lot of his original work. Think about Matt Dinniman and how popular Dungeon Crawler Carl is right now. It's booming. Dinniman is doing extraordinarily well. How many other books does he have out that don't have nearly the mind share of Dungeon Crawler Carl? And to be clear, I am not calling any of those efforts failures, okay? I am not. But the point I'm trying to make is that not every book from your favorite author is going to be a runaway home run that achieves mass cultural attention and runaway wild success. People write the book, and then they write the next one, then they write the next one, and they don't stop writing. And, you stay in the game and you can have that breakout moment. So I hope this provides a little bit more information on thinking about failure in your own headspace and your own relationship to it. It does not need to be scary. It just means that you made an effort and you tried. If you've liked this video, please give it a like. Let me know what you think in the comments. How do you deal with failure? What are your mindset hacks to help you get through things? Or if you're comfortable sharing, what are some of your biggest failures as an author so far that you have managed to shrug off or move beyond and stay in the game? I would love to hear what your experiences have been.